How does a cowboy aeronaut fly in his balloon resist interrogation from a woman with a mad baboon? That's all I got. Hey folks, welcome to Thumb Together TV. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Today we're going to be talking about His Dark Materials Season 2, Episode 3, Theft Together. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. Theft might be my favorite episode of this entire series so far. I love this to pieces. Here's why. Alright, first and foremost, the sexy elephant in the room here is Lin-Manuel Miranda. Lee Scoresby took this episode and ran with it. He had this nice little Western motif going on here. He lands his balloon in this old town and parks himself into a saloon and asks the locals for information on Stanislaus Grumman, because he's still looking for Stanislaus Grumman. And we, the audience, know, if we read the books, what's coming with Stanislaus Grumman. But don't worry, if you don't know, I'm not going to spoil that yet. Sit tight. So Lee's hot on the trail of Stanislaus Grumman, and he finds somebody who kind of knew him, but then a little firefight ensues, and the people get shot, and Lee doesn't like to shoot people because he's a good guy. And that's a beautiful moment, the pain on his face, where he's like, I didn't have to shoot you, man, because that guy in that weather station was just crazy for some reason, and Lee had to put him down. He didn't shoot to kill, and when he looked at that man's body, it's like, well, damn, and we felt that pain on Lee's face. He's not cold-blooded. He just wanted to look for someone. He wasn't asking for any trouble, but trouble found him. And that's Lee Scoresby in an unfortunate nutshell. Things only get worse when the Magisterium shows up and arrests him and locks him in a boiler room or something. I don't know. They don't really have dungeons here. They just have a scary boiler room. That's way too big for one person, but I'll allow it. Because it's in this room where we get the scene that I have been waiting for my whole life. Lee Scoresby is interrogated by Miss Coulter and her evil monkey too. And this is the first time in the series that these two actors have been on screen together, and it is powerful stuff. In one of the longest sequences we've gotten on His Dark Materials so far, the two of them sit in this boiler room and just talk. And Coulter being Coulter, she's threatening Lee. Her monkey is squeezing the hell out of Lee's rabbit Hester. There's promises of torture. Poor Lee's got a black eye and he's all banged up because the Magisterium are not nice folks. And Lee, on the other hand, he is just smiling. He's being as pleasant as possible, and he is refusing to tell her anything about Lyra's location because, as he keeps saying, my life is worth 1/10 of her life. And what's so gosh darned beautiful about this scene, folks, is that Mrs. Coulter, who wants to find Lyra because Lyra's her daughter, can't help but agree. She can't help but respect this man who loves her daughter so much that he is willing and ready to be tortured to protect her. I can't help but wonder if it was anybody else chained up in that boiler room and they were like, I'll talk, I'll tell you what you want to know, I'll tell you where Lyra is. I can't help but wonder if that would make Mrs. Coulter more upset, because she's like, you would sell out my daughter that quickly, huh? You're an asshole. But that's not Lee Scoresby, baby. Lee Scoresby is like, you can do whatever you want to me. I am not letting anything happen to that little girl. And that's where we see the connection form between Coulter and Scoresby. And her tough facade cracks and crumbles until we're left with a woman who is just respecting this man who is trying to protect her daughter. And she comes to the realization that they are on the same team. Even though she's been batting for the Magisterium for God knows how long, they don't have her best interests in mind. And she's always kind of known that. But it took this little moment with Lee to kind of cement that for her. And now she understands, what am I doing with these crazy zealots? Why am I torturing people for them? They don't care about me. They don't want what I want. Their endgame is not my endgame. Miss Coulter takes off for a minute. Her monkey beats the shit out of one of the guards. And then she waltzes back into the cell, throws the key at Lee and says, you knocked out the guard and escaped. Bye. And this puts a button on one of the greatest conversations this show has ever done, where we learn so much more about Coulter and we learn so much more about Scoresby, including the fact that his daddy was not a very nice fella, and he hasn't talked about him for years. We are getting such a fleshed out Lee Scoresby, and this guy was one of my favorite characters in the book, and unfortunately in the book, he didn't have this much to do. So I'm so glad they're not wasting Lin-Manuel Miranda. When I found out that he got cast in this role, I was a bit worried because I was like, you're casting a great dude to play a great character, who doesn't do much in the overall plot. So knowing that they're throwing all this extra juice in to give that character that much more, makes my heart melt like a fresh s'more on a campfire. And I can't wait to see where both Lee and Coulter end up next, because this show, as much as it is doing a great job adapting the source material, is also doing a great job of being unpredictable to those who know the source material. Bam! This is adaptation at its finest. That's why this is my favorite episode of his Dark Materials so far. But wait, there's more. The witches are pissed. They are looking at the seeds of destruction that have been planted by the Magisterium. The forest is all burned up. It looks like Mustafar here now. The witches are clearly on the warpath. They do not want to take this sitting down, and I don't blame them. I'm right there with them. And Serafina Pekkala's demon decides to pay a visit to none other than our old friend Yorick Burnison. We haven't seen him at all this season yet. I totally forgot about Yorick. I'm like, oh yeah, Yorick's got to come back into this. And there he is. Yorick is just walking around with his bear homies. They're in their armor. They've got a seal shortage, so they're starving, or they're about to be starving. And Serafina Pekkala's bird comes down and is like, I don't remember his name, so Serafina Pekkala's bird is what I have to call him. Sorry, bird. And he flies down and he's like, hey, Yorick, what's up? Listen, just so you know, the Magisterium bombed us. There's a war coming. I'm not asking you for your help. I'm just saying, if they bombed us, they will bomb you, because they jerks. And I gotta just say, the facial acting on Yorick Burnison was top notch. When he turns around and then the bird brings up Lyra and Yorick just kind of stops and he's in the foreground and he considers it and he turns back, I was like, whoever's doing the facial CGI on this bear, yes. Ian McKellen played the bear in the movie. I'm starting to think this CGI bear could outact Ian McKellen. He was that good. So we only got that little bitty taste of Yorick, but it's only a matter of time before Yorick starts to push his cuddly little snout into matters and get more involved. He's not sitting on his throne for the rest of the series, kids. I promise you, Yorick Burnison will be back. But then we have Lyra and Will. And when I mentioned last time that this was my favorite book, The Subtle Knife, book 2 was my favorite book in the trilogy, it's because of this part, because this part to me was the most exciting, where Lyra and Will are trying to figure out what to do. They've got this crazy tower in this eerie city full of specters, which Lyanna Mormont tells Will, like, ooh, there's a ghost up in that tower. And he's like, I don't know if that's a ghost, man. You crazy. And she's like, I got killed by a giant, so who am I to talk? And meanwhile, Lyra's hopping back and forth, talking to Mary Malone, trying to figure out the supercomputer so we can tell her about Dust. And then Lord Boreal comes around and takes the alethiometer. She gets robbed. That's why this episode's called Theft. And in the book, Boreal drives a Rolls Royce. And the chapter is even called The Rolls Royce, the chapter where he shows up. So I was looking forward to seeing a Rolls Royce, because Rolls Royces are pretty, and I wanted to see one. But instead, Lord Boreal drives a Tesla. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's fair. Maybe he's a more eco-friendly villain. But I have a question about cars, because I don't know cars. Do all Teslas have those like crazy up and down DeLorean doors? Or is that just the thing that they did for the show to be like, ooh, look, fantastical? Or are Teslas just the future? Because when Lord Boreal pulls up with this little hatchback electric car and all of a sudden the doors are like, I almost peed my pants. I'm also trying to be a bit louder than normal because the people upstairs keep dropping shit on the floor. Be quiet. Please. So Will and Lyra go to Boreal's house and he's got cameras on his property, and I'm like, oh shit, when this book was written in the 90s, you didn't have that. So they're at a disadvantage now because of technology. And Boreal takes them to his creepy ass basement and they sit down on the couch and he's like, I got the alethiometer, but I'm not giving it to you. And if you try to take it, I'll call the police. And they strike a deal. And this deal gets me so excited because it really spurs the plot of the story in a way that I think the first book didn't have this kind of spurring of plot. It just had kind of a slow wander trying to get to point B from point A, but it felt more sort of drawn out, not relaxed, but steady. And this feels tense. This feels like there's a ticking clock. This makes the plot really get rolling. Because Boreal tells the kids, if you want this back, you have to go to the tower in the floating city and get me the subtle knife, which is, after all, the name of book 2. So that's right, we are about to see Will and Lyra embark on a quest for the subtle knife. And if you don't know what the subtle knife does yet, you are in for a treat. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. My favorite episode of Dark Materials. Lock it in. I hope it's my favorite until next week, because I just like things getting better and better, because shouldn't that be how everything is, like, ever? So that has been his Dark Materials theft. I'm Andrew Fantasia. This has been Thumb Together TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you all here next time, and until then, adios.